Welcome to Sentinel Sessions at VT. My name is Sara Latzenheiser, and I will be your host today. Here at VT, also known as Veterans Tribute Career and Technical Academy, we are a Clark County School District magnet high school. Students come to our school because they're interested in first responder careers, such as law enforcement, 911 dispatch, emergency medicine, firefighting, and forensic science. We also have an incredible Army JROTC program and criminal justice courses for students interested in law. We like to say that we're preparing everyday heroes around here. Okay, welcome everybody. So on today's show, we are digging in deep. So first responder careers are exciting, right? People are generally interested in them. They see them on shows, cop shows, emergency room shows, crime scene shows, but those shows always highlight kind of the fun, exciting stuff, the flashing lights. As a high school here at Veterans Tribute that specializes in preparing first responders, our very first podcast episode is going to highlight arguably the most important topic for first responders, and that's their own mental health. So I have two incredible guests here with me. First, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Jeff Dill, who is a retired fire captain from Illinois. He's also a National Board Certified Counselor and the founder of Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. And most recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, he accepted a position as the Behavioral Health Administrator for the Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sara. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on your show.
Yay. And we also have Mike Worthen with us. He is a paramedic. He is the EMS Division Chief at the Nevada National Security Site, which we all kind of formally know as the Nevada Test Site. For their fire and rescue. He is passionate about teaching first responders around the valley about the importance of prioritizing their mental health. And so welcome, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So just going to start with kind of a little bit of background information, and then I want you guys to kind of share your stories in general. But in 2019, the U.S. Surgeon General highlighted suicide rates as a significant public health problem, right? And more specifically, research shows that suicide rates are much higher in first responders, including firefighters, EMTs, police officers. And so as first responders yourselves, our guests have seen the effect of mental health and are huge advocates for it. So I kind of want to start, I think, Jeff, maybe we'll start with you. Just before we get into that topic of mental health and first responders, tell me about like your background and how you got into your career.
Sure, I appreciate it. I started as a volunteer in 1990 and then went career in 1995 and moved up the ranks pretty quickly. I was a battalion chief most of the time, but it all started for me, the change in the behavioral health aspect, in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. Division 1 outside of Chicago sent down numerous firefighters, including a couple from our department, and when they came back, they showed me videos and photos. They were picking up bodies in the streets, the devastation, and so they were struggling and they were looking for some help. But understand, this is 2005, and we never talked about behavioral health in the fire services. Mike can attest to that. So what do we do? How do we help them? And the employee assisted programs were available, but we never went to them. And one of the reasons being is the issue is they don't know our world. Mm-hmm. And that's because we never let them in. And we never even talked about it. So I decided to go back, get my master's degree, and became a licensed counselor. And actually in 2009, I founded Counseling Services for Firefighters. I was training chaplains and counselors around the United States that if you want to work with us, you need to understand us. We're a little different.
Right.
Not that it's wrong from my point of view, but we're a little different. When in early 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from all over the world saying, do you do anything about firefighter suicides? I said, I had never heard of that. No one ever talked about that. I started doing some research, found out that this could be an issue. So my bride, Karen, and I, we founded FBHA in 2010, started talking about depression, addictions, PTS, relationship issues, but it was also the year that we started tracking and validating fire and EMS suicides. And so over these past 16 years, we have validated 2,267 of these tragic events, and I've personally spoken to about 2,200 chief officers to hear and collect all the data that we use and people use across the U.S. Traveled about 1.5 million miles speaking, so it's very important to me, and it's not really me picking things off the internet. It's the messages from our brothers and sisters and the family survivors that I try to share.
Right. Yeah. So that others can hear their stories, that they feel less alone.
Right. And it is important in regard to our children as well. You know, we have a program called Keeping Tabs, Together Against Bullying and Suicide for the schools. And we need to educate them at an early age to understand what it takes to get into this realm.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Mike, will you share a little bit about your background, how you became a paramedic?
Absolutely. So I'm one of the rare, or I'm not, but it's rare to have a native Las Vegan now. So I was born and raised here in Las Vegas. Just like you alluded to in your intro, is that the one thing that attracted me to the first responder world was, and Jeff can remember movies like this, or series Emergency with Johnny and Roy, right? Adam 12. Now I'm really aging myself. So after my football career didn't work out at Weber State University, came back here and took my first EMT basic class at Mercy Ambulance, which was the only private ambulance company here in town at that time. And like Jeff, I got my EMT basic, got my intermediate, went on to paramedic school, and everything was exciting and great for a while. Had my year of firsts, and then probably about 6 or 7 months into my career, I experienced my first coworker suicide.
Oh, wow.
And but just like we were taught back in the day, and which we're trying to change today, is that we stuff it down. Everybody has an emotional suitcase, especially first responders, because it was ingrained in us that we had to be strong and we had to be strong. And we've had the convoluted message that coming out and talking about stuff was perceived as being weak, and that it's totally the opposite. So, as my personal story progressed, in 1998, I got hired with Valley Hospital Flight for Life as a flight paramedic. And the next year, on April 3rd, 1999, had an aircraft accident. They crashed outside of Las Vegas. We lost 3 crew members, right? And Kathy Batterman, Leroy Shelton, and James Bond Jr.
I love that you just said their names.
Yes, I mean, that's to honor them, right?
Great tribute.
Yeah.
And so just like we were taught, we stuffed it down, and we stuffed it down. And so I went on to fly with another aeromedical program, Mercy Air, who's still currently here. And on September 7th, 2002, they had a catastrophic rotor failure going out to Baker, California. And once again, we lost 3 more crew members, right? Kalea Jarvan-Sunthi, Anna Coburn, and Marshall Butler. And at this time, I was 11 years into my career, and I'd lost the resiliency to appropriately handle my thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so I got into a bunch of maladaptive behaviors, which I struggled with for 4 years until I finally sought help. But I consider, even going through those darkest of times, and we can get to later on in the broadcast if you wish, I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones that was able to make it out the other side. Then in probably it was 2019, 2020, it's like, how can I, getting towards the twilight of my career, how can I set a pace for the next generation of first responders? Tell your story, because everybody needs to hear your story. And just like, and I couldn't agree more with Jeff, when EAPs,
What's EAP?
Employee Assistance Programs.
Okay.
They're getting a lot better than from where they were, because we need a lot more culturally competent clinicians. Try saying that real fast 5 times. That understand us,
right?
Because we have our own little bubble, right? And just like Jeff said, we don't let a lot of people in for various reasons, and I'll get into that later. But how can I leave a path that other first responders would understand? So I wrote an article in December of 2020 on better ways to cope.
Did you find that, I'm going to interrupt real quick, that difficult to, like, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to put my struggles for everybody to read?
Yes.
Right.
In short, yes, but I had to take myself out of it and look for the betterment of the message that was in my story, because not everybody is going to relate to Mike Worthen's story. So people are going to relate to Jeff Dill's story, or somebody is going to relate to Bill Smith's story. But as long as there's people out there that will relate to yours, I mean, everybody has a story, especially in the first responder world, but everybody in society does. And somebody needs to hear yours. So never be afraid of your story, because there's going to be a person out there that's going to benefit from it. And it's the ripple effect that you may never even see the results of that. So in 2020, I wrote that, and I was approached by Brian Rogers, who's a CEO of Community Ambulance, and Rob Richardson, who's the COO. I may have those reversed, but he goes, how would you like to speak to our orientation classes? So it started from there, and then I've been able to be fortunate enough and been given the opportunities to go to other places to speak about our mental health.
That's great.
I just wanted, Mike is so right about that, stuffing it down. It's a term I coined called cultural brainwashing.
Okay.
So if I asked you, Sara, when you hear the term firefighter, what words come to your mind?
Like heroic, strong, right? Like resilient, brave.
Okay. So we have 14 different workshops, and one for families, one for chaplains and counselors. I always started out with that. And in 16 years, I've yet to hear anyone say, well, they have anger issues. They really suck at communications. They drink like fish.
Right.
Because society is culturally brainwashed. Now, imagine putting this uniform on every day where you have to act brave, strong, courageous, give help, don't ask for help. I handle all things on my own. I don't want anyone to think I'm the weak link of the company. And when you're challenged in your personal or professional life to go those things alone, it becomes difficult. And you see why so many of us struggle with addictions, depression, or whatever, relationships. And relationships are tough. I mean, divorce rates, almost 65% in the first responder world. So it can be very challenging.
So ideally, like, this podcast is not just for those who want to be first responders, but for all of us, right? Like, as a society, the more we're aware, the less like sort of pressure we put on any first responder to be all those things, and give them kind of the grace to not be.
Right.
And one of the things that I say in my classes is that, there are times that we have to be strong and we have to handle the situation at hand. But at the end of your shift, whether it's a 12-hour shift, 24, 48, whatever your agency works, when you go home, regardless of what uniform you wear and you take that uniform off, you're still human underneath with normal human emotions, normal human thoughts, normal human feelings. And I think what I've seen is that a lot of us think that the badge and the uniform makes us impervious to all those things, and it doesn't. And we have to realize at the end of the day that we're human too, even though we do an extraordinary job.
And it's also a point where we have to understand this job does not define who we are either.
Right.
And many, unfortunately, get sucked up into that. And
That's your identity.
Absolutely. And then when they retire, that loss of identity becomes a real big issue.
And that's and I'm so glad you brought that up, Jeff, because that's one of the things that I touch on when I speak about balance in our lives, is that whatever you decide to do, whether it be a firefighter, police officer, go into the military, you're an ER physician, ER nurse, you work at the coroner's office, be dedicated and be the very best person that you can be, best firefighter, best police officer. But don't make that your total identity, because just like Jeff said, when it comes to retirement, when I was working part-time at the coroner's office from the beginning of 18 to the end of 19, there was 3 police officers, 2 firefighters that died by suicide that came into the office, and 3 out of those 5 individuals had all been retired in less than a year.
And you like to think like, oh, now you're free of this pressure and that identity to be brave and heroic. And I do. That actually was one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is you're not in the throes with your colleagues. You're not in the trenches anymore. Your identity is not that anymore. So what services are out there, or what would you say, those who are approaching retirement can do to ensure that they are prepared mentally to kind of leave the job and maybe lose that identity a little bit?
Well, I think a lot has to do with the agency you work with.
Okay.
And with us at LVFR, being the behavioral health administrator, I'm constantly trying to ensure that our retirees or those who are about to retire are just aware of all our resources. We put everything, Jacob Thatcher and myself, we put everything on a QR code. And so they can look at this QR code and see all the counselors that I have vetted and trained, all the chaplains, all the peer support team members, all the inpatient facilities, the outpatient facilities. So to make it available to understand that loss of identity, loss of belonging, and lack of purpose are three big issues in retirement. And going to that point where Mike said about losing people, retired within a year, in our data of about 399 retirees, 37 of them took their lives within the first week of retirement.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a problem in my book. Instead of just giving them an axe on a board and say, hey, here's a party, thank you, what are we doing to prepare them to understand the emotional impact of retirement?
Right, like there needs to be some sort of, like just as there's academy coming in, almost like this transition going out.
Right.
Like, so that they're better prepared.
And I've seen a lot of people who don't have those resources in place. The transitional period, maybe 6 months before you're going to retire, they have an exit plan. I've seen a lot of people who don't have an exit plan, or agencies that don't have an exit plan, and we take on the feelings that, oh, well, you just used me for 25 or 30 years, now you're spitting me out.
Right.
That type of mentality, because they lose all connection with the camaraderie that they've been a part of for the last 25, 30 years. And that can be very demeaning.
Do you think most agencies, whether here in the Valley or nationwide, have something like that for their employees, or is that few and far between?
No, I would estimate probably less than 2% of all fire and EMS organizations, plus probably less than 5% have any type of behavioral health program. I mean, a complete behavioral health program. Having a peer support team and an employee system program, that's not a complete behavioral health program.
And do you think, I imagine one, that's because of the stigma, like you said, push it all down, but do you think part of it is they're just not spending money on it? Why is it? Is it there's not resources available? That's not their priority?
Well, until you suffer a suicide or maybe a line of duty death, it might not be a priority. And if you had to make some budget cuts within your organization, well, you're not going to cut people. So typically the next one is training. Mm-hmm. And so when we look from the fire side, well, we can't, hose line advancement and extrication, we can't cut that because that's what we use every day. We'll do behavioral health next year. And so unfortunately it gets pushed to the side.
Down.
So
obviously things have changed a little bit, right, from the beginning of your careers to where you are now. What do you attribute that change to? Do you think the culture has changed within your agencies and people are willing to talk about their feelings with each other? What do you think, Mike?
I think it is beginning to change. We still have a long ways to go. And that's why programs such as yours, getting the message out there, is so very vitally important to the next generation of first responders that are coming up, because they have to know that you can't change those things that you don't acknowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to let the next generation, even this current generation, to know that, you know what, if you're having an issue, it's okay to reach out. So I think for me, I think the changing point started on 1 October here. It really brought to light not only the horrific tragedy that took place here in Las Vegas, but the effect that it had on all the first responders, police officers, firefighters, private ambulance, and the need for post-care for those responders.
Right, absolutely.
And so I think it's changing, and I think the generation that we have today that's coming up is better suited and better prepared for us in this respect, is that they're more apt to talk about their feelings than we were when we were coming up and growing up. At least that's my perspective.
As working at a high school, I would agree with that. Like, I feel like I hear students say, I'm going to take a mental health day. And so that is good from that standpoint. There's not the work.
Yeah, and one group, of course, is our dispatchers. mean, that night of October 1, talking to our dispatchers at Las Vegas, very, very horrific. But there's a lot of things that we have seen that have been very positive. The development of peer support groups, especially in the fire service. About 2014, two good friends of mine from Illinois, Sara and Matt Olson, they started training firefighters across the state of Illinois, and then that started really picking up. And then the other thing is, Mike alluded to it earlier, is our counselors that are now understanding our world. And we are letting them in, and we're doing training. I train with BHO, our EAP. I train their clinicians. And these people, I was just on a panel on Friday. There was 85 clinicians there wanting to understand. But I also tell them it might not be for all of you, too, because it's difficult work. And you start getting into some of the things that you hear and see. And I've seen it now in the last few years. Some of those clinicians are burning out because to hear that constant threat that the firefighter or paramedic or dispatcher had to deal with, it becomes overwhelming.
But you can imagine it, if the counselor's burning out, what about the person who's
Right.
seeing, you know what I mean? Like, that's just, how are they feeling, which has to be much more severe.
And that's one of the things that I think is a big, not only what we see, but what we express to our counselors, the vicarious trauma that they experience. And that's one thing as first responders, when we go home and we get off shift, we don't want to expose our loved ones, our spouses to that vicarious trauma. So here comes another issue, is the feeling of a lack of support at home, because we're trying to protect them from what we've seen. And it's a double-edged sword. We're trying to protect them at our detriment, right? So we need a really good support program in place. And I would like to see eventually, and I know some academies do it, some fire academies do it, they bring the spouses in and kind of express to them, hey, when your husband comes home or your wife comes home and they're really, really quiet, it's not you. It's something they may have seen or experienced on shift, because we're still trying to process the double fatality or the triple fatality motor vehicle accident that we've seen that involved children, that was just a really bad scene. So that's one thing that I would like, I hope comes more to the forefront, is support for the families and the spouses.
Right, because you said, like, divorce rates are so high, and there's a misunderstanding, but it's not intentional. It's kind of like, that underneath aspect.
Yeah,
Right.
for the last 4.5 years, we've had family nights the night before the academy starts, and we bring the families in, and it's an eye-opener for them to what to expect from your loved ones who are going through the academy, what to watch out for, but not only in them, but in you as well. And it's a thing I call internal size-up. Another one I coined. But what that means to me is that every one of us needs to ask two questions. Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? And the best thing that we can do is listen to others, because they see us better than we will ever see ourselves. My wife of 45 years, she knows my tone of voice, my body language, everything. But we also have to learn to listen to our bodies when it says, why aren't we sleeping? Why are we becoming angry? Why is our stress level? Why have we turned to an addiction? And that's telling us. So I tell our brothers and sisters, push pride to the side, reach out and get that help.
So with that kind of being said, what advice would you give, right? Like, so I'm the magnet recruiter. I go out and I talk to 8th graders about our school and if they're interested in our first responder careers. And we have, 9th through 12th graders, right? So we have, 14 to 18-year-olds on our campus that are interested in these careers. So what would you say to them, their families, like before maybe they embark on the reality of it? Because we're just a high school preparing them, but what would you say, like, hey, maybe don't do this or make this your priority? What advice would you give them?
I think the very first piece of advice I would suggest is be aware. Try to set mental and emotional boundaries for yourself, because first responders, we don't do too well with boundaries, right? And Jeff can attest to this too. And because you can't change those things that you're not aware of. And if you think something's wrong, then something probably is wrong, right? Have a support group in place, right? And understand that the career that you're about ready to embark on, it's inevitable that you're going to see some really bad stuff. But suffering in silence and suffering alone is optional, because there are people that came before you, people that are coming right alongside you, and people that are going to come after you that's going to understand what you're going through. If I'm having an issue, I don't even have to talk to another firefighter or paramedic. I know that if I'm in a conference in Baltimore, I can go to a police station where I can pull a law enforcement officer aside, and not even knowing him personally, he'll understand what I've been through. Hey, I'm on the job and I'm dealing with this. He'll get it. They'll get it. We get each other.
Okay, no, that's good. Awareness, support, like make it apparent.
And boundaries.
And boundaries.
Yeah, you're sitting too close here, Mike. That's my boundary line. Yeah. So I would, I'd like to also add that as you get into this world, first responder, like I said, I was a paramedic, so and understand EMS in the fire world, they run about 85% of the calls.
Right, yes.
So EMS, they're very, very busy people. But I would ask them to make sure they understand the difference between having empathy and being an empath. Having an empathy is you're going in on that call and you feel bad for this mother who's unfortunately lost an infant or something.
Okay.
But then, maybe you can talk to someone and then that dissipates after time. Being an empath, you absorb that pain and you live it because of that loss. And that's a problem because then they're struggling with all these emotions because they're absorbing everyone's problem that they go on. So understand that there is a difference between having empathy and being an empath.
Right, you can still be compassionate to
Absolutely.
who you're treating,
Yes.
but you don't have to take it.
And I think, and that's a great topic to expound upon, because so many times we give so much of ourselves that we forget to give back to ourselves, right? I mean, and it goes back to the old adage that you can't pour from an empty cup. Mm-hmm. And I think we need, as first responders, we need to realize when our cup is empty, and we need to fill that back up with self-care, support, therapy if needed. And because if we do that, then we're better apt and better equipped to serve the people that we've been designated to serve.
Yeah, and we talk about all these traumatic things that we will see, but I'm a firm believer that moral injury plays a larger role than post-traumatic stress in the first responder
So
world.
explain what's moral injury.
So moral injury is, and Dr. Jonathan Shea is credited with that term back in the 80s, and he worked with the military, did a lot of research on moral injury in the military. So when I started looking into it, based on two firefighters who called me out of one of the stations years ago and said, Jeff, have you heard this term? So I started doing more and more research. Comes out, the belief is, under the Shea Foundation, is that as human beings, we're born inherently to do good. And then we get into the EMS and the fire world, and we're trained to save lives. That's what we're trained to do. Well, over the last 2 or 3 years in my travels, I've done an informal survey of my brothers and sisters at class, and I asked them, what is our true save rate? By the time we get there for a full arrest, a drowning, electrocution, a vehicle accident, a suicide attempt, or whatever it is, what's our save rate? And we came to the consensus that it was about 5 to 8%.
Wow.
So that's it. So now we're starting to feel, well, geez, we're feeling guilty and shame. Where PTS is trauma-based, fear-based, moral injury is more on our emotions, our emotional aspect. And one key aspect of moral injury is betrayal. Betrayal by management. Hey, you promised us more pay, less time, less overtime, better equipment. Betrayal by others. We've been friends for 30 years, and now it's job promotion time, and you're stabbing me in the back with all these lies to make yourself look better. Or why are you harassing and bullying people on our department? Betrayal by ourselves. I saw you bully and harass people, but I didn't say anything. Or maybe I went out and had an affair with someone. Now I ruin my relationship with my spouse and my children, or my partner and my children. And so where, like I said, those emotions of guilt and shame, failure to do good, rule within us as human beings. And when I asked the military, speaking to them, you can have PTS and moral injury at the same time, two different types of therapy approach.
Okay.
And the key for moral injury is that you have to ensure that you try to help that person to learn how to forgive. Forgive others, forgive yourself. And when I asked the military, looking at their data, I said, when you looked at your data, where is the highest attribution of suicide to? And they said, by far, we lost more soldiers to moral injury than PTS.
So they are, like you said, not forgiving themselves. They're almost like manifesting all of this like onto themselves and creating more conflict, more problem because of the guilt that they feel for what they did not do.
And it could be in any situation, because we know in our data of the 2,267 losses of our brothers and sisters, unknown is the number one known reason why the families or the chief officers. But by far, the number one was relationships. Relationship issues, followed by depression and then post-traumatic stress. So,
and that's why that family aspect at the beginning is so essential.
absolutely it is. It is a key component for the first responder world, is to make sure that you bond. And you can do that internal size up with a loved one. At the end of the night, just say, hey, what emotions did I display? How did it affect you? And how can we work on that together? Because of the communications that you need to adhere to all the way up into retirement, right?
Right.
Because we have divorce rates high in retirement. It's almost like an empty nest. They don't know who they are. And so I make recommendations for those retiring about 6 months before you retire. Go see a marriage counselor. Because that day you walk in and say, hey, I'm home. And they're saying, oh, all day now, all the time? That's a problem.
Right.
Because I've been gone on shift work. Mike's been gone on shift work. We can't expect them to drop everything and just, hey, this is what we're going to do. They've developed a life of their own. Mm-hmm. So you go to marriage counseling to work on communications.
That's great.
Jeff has just opened up a floodgate of thoughts that
love it.
that I just want to just touch on very briefly. Is that first with the moral injury, and I want to talk a moment about workplace toxicity, and that's why we need buy-in from our chief officers, from our senior chief officers, from our administration, from city council, from the county commission. We need buy-in from them. It starts at the top, because it'll roll downhill, right? Mm-hmm. Workplace toxicity, I know at the previous places I worked that when we go out there and deal with some of the worst, we need to have a safe place to come back to. And if our work environment is full of toxicity and everything else, we're not getting that relief that we need, and we're not getting that opportunity to decompress and process the things that we need to process.
You go from like one trauma to another trauma.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And then another thing that Jeff spoke about was the support at home and the understanding at home. That's one of the big reasons why firefighters, police officers work a lot of overtime. Because that's where we feel comfortable.
Right. That's your identity. That's where you feel safe.
That's where we feel safe.
People.
Our people, right? Everything that you just said. When we come home, at least I'm going to speak for myself. When I come home, now it's taking care of the girls and everything else. And so it goes from 0 to 100, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, and speaking to other first responders, they feel the same way. It's the quiet that is uncomfortable for us, because now we're alone with our thoughts. We're alone with things that we now have to address.
Whereas you're running from call to call, then you don't ever have to sit with those
It's
thoughts.
a distraction, exactly.
And you're with people all day long. That's why I think it's more difficult for police officers, because most of them are driving alone in the car. And what happens? Ideas ruminate throughout their mind all day, and they have a gun right on their hip.
Right.
And so it's what I call cognitive disconnect. At times, people make decisions to end their lives based on the emotions they're going through at that moment. And reality went right out the window.
Right.
And if you're not standing there by them at that moment, how do we stop that? And it's through education, trying to do some training on behavioral health. I'm the first to admit, I get upset when I hear people say suicide is 100% preventable, because all that does is then throw guilt on the family and friends.
Right.
Oh, you should have done something. It's 100% preventable. Not if they're doing fine and everything's good, and then they get a phone call from maybe a loved one, I'll say in this case, that says, you know what, I'm out, divorce. Rejection is hard in our world. and we feel betrayed by our loved one. All of a sudden now they want to leave. Maybe it's because we didn't really treat them that well. We turned to an addiction and made life hell at home. Excuse my language.
No, that's
but that's that thought process. Oh, you know what? I'll be better off. I'll be rid of this pain. My family will be better off. And that's that thought process. They're basing it on that emotion at that time.
And someone even being educated that you are going to feel this at some point. You are going to feel this disconnect and this emotion, and I want to call it quits. And hopefully then their education will come back and go, I know I'm going to go through these things. This is just a feeling. It's going to pass. And then with that education, then they cannot make that choice.
And that's that internal size of IT. Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? Push pride to the side and reach out and ask for help.
And impulsivity is a huge thing too, is because we're trained to react and not respond, right? Mm-hmm. The difference between the two is reacting is our brains are wired to just think 3 or 4 steps ahead, hypervigilance, and just automatically react to, because our situational awareness, our lives and the lives of our patients depend on it. However, we need to pull back just a little bit and respond, think cognitively through everything. So it's really hard for us to just breathe for a second, think about the things that we're doing, because we can be very impulsive at times.
Yeah,
because
you've been trained to.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
It's also called hypervigilant.
Right.
We are very hypervigilant. And society has made it even worse for us, because when I started in 1990, we could have parades in a town. We didn't have to worry about trucks driving down the sidewalk hitting people, people standing on buildings shooting people, churches, schools, and things. We didn't have that back then. So the calls have changed for our EMS, our dispatchers, our police, our firefighters. They've changed, and not for the better. There's a lot of anger out there. So you have to learn to deal with that when you get into that first responder world, and understand it's not personal, but you have to deal with it.
So I have my next question. We talked a little bit about this before we even started recording. Like when I was looking up kind of just some stats, like maybe even to share, that they didn't seem as extreme as I felt that the mental health despair or concern there is in first responders, right? Like I thought I might see maybe more staggering numbers than what I saw. And we talked maybe a little bit about they're not all reported. And so I guess what could help us record accurately either suicide rates or visit people acknowledging, yep, I'm seeing a counselor, things like that, that would help your agencies see that there is a problem. And instead of having 2 to 5% of our agencies offer these services, it should be 50%, one day hopefully 100%. Do you think it's part of it is because numbers aren't reported accurately? That was a long question.
Well, I think Mike hit it the nail on the head when he said you have to have buy-in from the top.
Okay.
So we have to have a firefighter, in my case, medic, in Mike's case as well, is that if they're struggling with an addiction or something, they should have the comfort of going to their supervisor and saying, hey, I'm struggling. I'm coming to you asking for your help. And that should hold no negative response from the leaders.
Okay.
So, thank you for coming forward. Let's get you into an intensive outpatient, some type of inpatient facility to help you, to assist you, and not feel like they're going to be punished. So, unfortunately, because they're not coming forward, at times it's too late. When they're picked up for a DUI or a spousal abuse or something like that, then it's really difficult, because sometimes they're dealing with felony charges.
Right. And then that's hard to have the support.
It's hard to keep their job. Mm-hmm. And so if we can, have policies and guidelines to say, you come to us prior to anything, say, I need some help, we're going to give you that help.
Okay. Yeah.
And on a personal basis, I knew this was going to come up throughout the course of the podcast, is that what Jeff talks about is, I'm a personal example. Almost 20 years ago, I did that exact same thing, because I got to the point to where I could either save my face or save my butt. Mm-hmm. And I chose to save my face, right? Or save my butt. Sorry, I'm reversed. Not enough caffeine this morning. So I had to humble myself and go to a treatment program. And now, fast forward almost 20 years, I've been without any substances or anything else, and it hasn't always been easy, right? But one of the things that pushed me and made me feel comfortable to focus on my recovery back then was exactly what Jeff said, was that, Mike, we love you, we care about you, we want to see the best for you, you have our total support. I even had our assistant chief at the time, our deputy chief at the time, and he goes, if you need a ride down to California, that's where I went for treatment, he goes, I will drive you personally down there.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And it gets to me to this day, because for somebody to take their time and care that much about us that we don't often see, very rarely see, from our chief officers, our administration, and everything else. And that's why it's so important that we get that message, the floor personnel, we get that message from our superiors and everybody else. That would, I think, would let people be more adamant to come forward with any issues that they're having.
And I think what Mike talks about is exactly what your audience needs to listen to. Is here's a gentleman who's opening himself up and talks about the issues that he dealt with, and it's okay. No one should be judging him, because he's a human being. He said, "Hey, you know what? I needed some help," and he sought it. And look where he's at 20 years later. And that's what we need out of our younger group, because they are our future. I'm 64. I'm not going to be in this much too longer. And so they are our future, to make sure that it's okay to say, hey, I need some help. And who's going to offer it to me? And it might be them 15 years from now when they're an officer in that role. So it takes a strong person to say, hey, reach out their hand and say, someone, can you help me?
And I have when I speak to these different classes and different agencies, I have this saying, because we're all afraid of judgment. I think as humans, we're afraid of judgment, especially as a first responder. We're supposed to be the strong type and everything else, right? And we're even more afraid of judgment, I think. So I tell the people that I speak to is that one thing when it comes to judgment, just remember this little saying is, those who judge don't matter, and those who matter don't judge.
That's great.
Right? And we can't be afraid of what other people think, because we can't control that anyway. And you never know when, just like I said at the beginning of the podcast, you never know when your story, regardless of what it entails, will help somebody else that's in that very same position.
And I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
And you'll hear me say time and time again, the greatest thing I've learned doing FBHA, tracking the suicides and things, is that I've learned not to judge, because I never walked in their shoes in their life and have no idea what their history was. So to me, that's a blessing, because I'm just there to help that person, not judge you.
And it goes back to what, and I use this all the time as well, is what Robin Williams said, is that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always.
That's great. Well, speaking a little bit about young people, I did reach out to our students and ask them for some questions, right? Because ultimately, like, them and their families are our audience, maybe even our agencies are our audience. And so I'm just going to ask a few questions from them. And so we do have a senior. His name is Abner. He's in our EMS program. And you kind of talked a little bit about this with either the compassion fatigue. But, like, what do you do, or what would you recommend for these first responders when you do have those regrets? Like, I messed up on this call. I made a mistake. How do you manage that?
Go ahead.
I think it's important that we then reach out to talk to someone.
Okay.
And, everyone has heard the word resiliency. Resilient. For me, resiliency begins by talking about issues that have been building up in your life, whether it's good or bad. Talk about, because I'm a firm believer, we don't only learn from good experiences, we learn from bad experiences in our life, and that develops us for our future. And so when we, unfortunately, if there's been a mistake, own it.
Yeah.
Own it. Say, I made that mistake. I need maybe some additional training. I probably need to talk to someone so I don't incur that moral injury where I have that emotion of, I made a mistake.
The guilt, yeah.
Absolutely. So take ownership of it. Seek help to talk to someone.
And as a good friend of mine, Michael Pellegrino, he has a book out that's called Crisis Equals Opportunity, right? So a mistake could be considered a crisis, especially in our job, right? Use that as an opportunity to get better and to be better, right? Because nobody is perfect. Nobody came out doing every single algorithm in ACLS perfectly each time, right? We're going to make mistakes. We're human. And I think that if you have that sort of mindset, that, you know what, I'm going to make mistakes, but that's okay. And that's one of the things in self-care that I try to teach to these younger generation is be patient and kind with yourself, because you're going to make mistakes, right? Don't beat yourself up for it, right? And just go and learn from it and do better next time.
Very good. I love hearing these answers. These are great for everybody to hear. My next question is from a junior. Her name is Juliet. She's in our 911 dispatch program. And you, both of you, I think, kind of touched on this a little bit. Mike, you maybe a little bit more. Were there times where you really reconsidered your career path and was like, I'm done, I'm not going to do this because of the toll it was taking on your mental health?
I think when I first got into this, I didn't understand the toll that my mental health would take. I was, enamored by the lights, the sirens, the status, and everything else, right? And it wasn't until much later in my career that I was already in it. And I was probably 11, 12 years in, 13 years. And it's like, wow, okay, I'm here. What can I do about it? I did think, and I'll joke and jest, maybe I should have gone to PA school. Maybe I should have went to medical school. But I truly believe you truly end up where you belong. But that's just my personal thought. I also think that this career, a first responder career, is one of the most selfless, rewarding, and great careers. It has its limitations on the self-care aspect of it, but I don't think I would trade it in the world, because you're there serving your community and you're serving your fellow man and woman.
And I think that's great. You just keep coming back to that decision. This is where I want to be. I want to serve.
Right.
Yeah.
But within that spectrum, or within that boundary, you also have to be able to understand that you got to serve yourself too. And serving yourself comes with the self-care and everything else, so you can, be better apt to serve the people that, we were meant to serve.
That's great. Jeff, was there ever a time
I think you answered that perfectly. For me, it took me 14 years to finally realize what I do for FBHA is difficult. Calling and hearing 2,267 stories of suicides, and I've lost 35 people I've come to know over these past 16 years. But I never got to the part where that's it. I'm a strong believer in the good Lord and His Son. So if I can say that on radio.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I know also that my wife is my best friend, and so I've always had that nice support around me to continue doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not on the front lines anymore. I work from the behavioral health aspect of it. It wasn't what I had planned. I mean, I never lost anyone to suicide growing up. I saw it on the job and doing this. It's just that this was what was designated for me, and I accepted it. And I know that, like Mike said, there's limitations. We're not gods. We just try to do the best that we can do with the training that was given to us and the goodness in our hearts and souls to help others. And so I never had a thought, retirement, yes. I'd like to retire from FBHA, but not now. I love teaching. I love educating people on behavioral health.
Well, and it's clear that you are both passionate about it, and you see the need there. Like there's still a long ways to go. You have both said, right? Okay, so I kind of just want to end a little bit with, I have learned a ton. I hope our audience has too. I am grateful for both of your time. I'm grateful for your service, not only in the first responder realm, but being those advocates for mental health, because the reality is, as you said, the need is there. Is there anything you'd kind of like to leave our audience with, any parting words, like whether it would be for students or families or agencies, that you think they should know before we kind of wrap this up?
I think that if I had one thing to say to those that are about ready to embark on the first responder career is always keep in the back of your mind that you are the most important patient that you will ever take care of. The patients that we serve, they're important, yes, but you're just as important as they are, and you need to treat yourself with the respect and the love that you deserve.
Love it.
Yeah, it's very similar, is that you have to practice what you preach. If you're out there helping others, then you have to practice on helping yourself as well. Coping skills. Don't let this job define who you are. Always keep who you are as an individual to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen. I very much appreciate you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
If you like what you heard here today, we have producer Zach Fishman to thank for that. And make sure you tune in to our next episode of Sentinel Sessions at VT with VT graduates who are now working in the first responder industry. Tune in to hear their journey, their start, the path they took, and where they are now.